A down year for the Saints. Is it potentially the year that they're paying the piper for the continuous role of let's kick the can down the road with returns to the salary cap? They traded up in the first round last year to go and get Chris Olave. He had a fantastic rookie season. He showed that he is potentially a, superstar moving forward. Do you think that this offense is going to be good enough that he can continue to grow, continue to develop, and be that superstar over the next couple of years, Tom?
I think it all comes down to the quarterback situation, doesn't it? I mean, Andy Dalton, he's going to be a free agent. Jameis Winston, the relationship between the team and him seems quite broken. We saw him speak out numerous times about how hurt he felt that he lost his job through injury, and then the team never really clarified publicly why they made the decision to go to Andy Dalton. But Olave produced both those quarterbacks. If you get even a mid-tier quarterback in, I think a mid-tier quarterback is probably an improvement on the two of those. I think they'd be consistent more than Winston and Dalton. Then I think, the ceiling is the roof kind of thing for Chris Olave. He was the rookie wide receiver too, almost broke 1,000 yards. We saw him have a couple of little knocks towards the end there. He had 6 top 24 weeks, which is, for a rookie coming in, that's the kind of production that I'm looking for, because you get them at quite a nice discount. You get the occasional spike weeks. But if he's turning in performances where he's a wide receiver too, that's great. And the Saints threw the 6th fewest pass attempts this year, so he was really efficient on what he had to work with.
Yeah, and that wide receiver room is potentially in flux. Michael Thomas, it feels like we've not seen anything of him over the last few years. They've restructured his contract in the offseason, so we're going to get an answer on what they're doing over the next couple of months. Do you think that Michael Thomas will stay a Saint? Do you think that they're going to bring somebody else in to compete alongside Olave?
It feels like the writing's on the wall, and it feels like the right time for a change for both Michael Thomas and for the Saints. Like, they invested a lot of money on him at a time where you had to. He was breaking all kinds of records and he looked incredible. But ever since then, it's been completely nothing. And this Saints team, they are paying the piper for pushing the cap down the road and always just, no matter what Saints fans tell you about Mickey Loomis being a genius, this is what happens when you keep doing that and you keep tacking on void years. Eventually, you do have to look at making big changes. And I think the Saints will be better off for it long term if they actually just start drafting some receivers. But of course, the Eagles have got the first overall pick.
And then the other big question mark about this team moving into next year, Alvin Kamara, there's this potential suspension that is looming. He had a pretty down year, certainly down the stretch. In startup drafts at the moment, he is falling. His value has fallen, and it is completely continuing to plummet. Do you think that he is somebody that you could potentially look to invest in next year if that price continues to drop?
I think the biggest argument for taking Alvin Kamara at the minute would be saying that he has to have some positive touchdown regression. He only scored touchdowns in 2 weeks this season. There were whispers that the team weren't overly happy with him. And he did, he only had 4 top 10 finishes and he had 4 outside the top 40, which is really awful. But he had the 3rd most receiving yards per game, and that really kept him afloat. And that tends to be a bit stickier. We see a lot of running backs who, as they get older, they can still make work in the receiving game because it's those kind of near line of scrimmage routes. And if he has a quarterback who likes to check down, that'd be fine. If they bring in a quarterback who likes to rush the ball and doesn't throw to his running backs, then that might be quite difficult to salvage any value out of it. But he's currently being drafted as the RB19 in early best ball drafts over on Underdog. We saw this year when Hopkins was suspended and that was kind of baked into his ADP. He came back and returned some value. And maybe if there's a suspension for Kamara, that's the time where I'll probably start drafting him a little bit in best ball to just kind of see what kind of dip I can get.
Okay. And then over at the tight end position, hard to believe the Saints had 2 top 15 tight ends in points per game. You've got Juwan Johnson, who rode some, high touchdown variants to a decent finish, but then Taysom Hill, can't quite understand how he's being classified as a tight end, but he was a tight end, finished as a top 12 tight end. What do you reckon about both of those heading into next year, Tom?
Well, if Sean Payton's back in the league and somewhere else, then there's always the hope that Taysom Hill gets signed to a different team and moves on. And perhaps Juwan Johnson could break out. I mean, he had the 4th most touchdowns amongst tight ends. and betting on that being sticky can definitely be fool's gold at tight end. But he looked really good. I mean, he's a converted wide receiver, isn't he? So he's somebody who all we're getting from him is pass catching. We're not worried about the blocking. And he definitely flashed at times. And depending on how high his ADP gets, I'd be willing to take shots on him next year.